Welcome everyone to another episode of Archetype Review. In this episode, we are going to be looking into the A to Z series of cards. The A to Z series of cards gets the name simply because of the fact that the main monsters in this series are actually named after individual letters. Despite the name saying A to Z series, it's not indicating that there's actually 26 different monsters, because that's just simply not true. In fact, there are only 8 main monsters in this entire series. In addition, despite this being an archetype review, technically speaking, this series of cards is not actually an archetype, simply because it doesn't actually have this official name, A to Z, and there are no cards that actually specifically support A to Z in the card text. There are a lot of cards that actually support specifically Union Light Machine monsters, and if you didn't already know, A to Z monsters are actually Union Light Machine or Normal Light Machine. So there is plenty of support, it's just that it doesn't have it specifically, which is why it's not an archetype. The series actually started way back in the Magician's Forest days, back when X, Y, and Z were the first 3 main monsters introduced in addition to a few fusion monsters. With the introduction of the GX anime, however, it got further expanded into 2 additional main monsters, being W and V. And lastly, eventually the ABC monsters got introduced through the introduction of the Kaiba Structure deck. As I mentioned before, the monsters are primarily light Union machines or light normal machines, and they all have this very unique contact fusion sort of fusion summoning mechanic. Regardless though, it's a series of cards that was not very good when it came out and actually got a little bit better simply because of the introduction of the ABC monsters, which we'll get into in just a little bit. So we'll begin with the first 3 main monsters to be introduced, and these are X-Head Cannon, Y Dragon Head, and Z Metal Tank. X-Head Cannon is a basic vanilla monster with an 1800 attack, making it a pretty sizable beat stick actually. Y Dragon Head on the other hand has lower stats in exchange for it having an effect, and it's basically a Union monster. The effect essentially reads that once per turn you can either target one X-Head Cannon you control and equip this card to that target, or you can unequip this card and special summon it. And a monster equipped with this card gains 400 attack and defense. Also, if the monster equipped would be destroyed by battle or card effect, destroy this card instead. Z Metal Tank on the other hand has the same attack but less defense, and it being a Union monster also has an effect that says once per turn you can either target one X-Head Cannon or a Y Dragon Head you control and equip this card to that target, or you can unequip this card and special summon it. A monster equipped with this card gains 600 attack and defense, and also if the equipped monster would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you destroy this card instead. So as you can see, there's sort of a hierarchy with X-Head Cannon being at the top, Y Dragon Head in the middle, and Z Metal Tank being at the bottom in terms of who can equip to what. In addition, Z Metal Tank has the best equipping effect because it provides more attack, whereas Y Dragon Head's is a little mediocre. Regardless though, it's clear that these monsters are basic Union monsters, as they have the basic Union effect in terms of protecting monsters that they are equipped to, in addition to granting a very slight amount of attack points, which is also pretty helpful. While they were okay back when they came out, really quickly they actually declined. Moving into the fusion counterparts, let's go ahead and begin with the first 3, being XY Dragon Cannon, XZ Tank Cannon, and YZ Tank Dragon. All 3 are level 6 light machine monsters with different effects. Let's begin with Dragon Cannon. So this one requires an X-Head Cannon and a Y Dragon Head, and the effect says that it must first be special summoned from your extra deck by banishing the above cards you control, and you do not use polymerization. It cannot be special summoned from the graveyard. You can discard one card, then target one face-up spell or trap card your opponent controls, destroy that target. The first couple parts of the effect are actually shared among these different fusion monsters, but as you can see, they're very specific in terms of what you can do with the monsters to bring them out, as you cannot use polymerization and you cannot special summon the card from the graveyard as well. The second effect, really the only good thing about that effect is the fact that it's not a once per turn effect, meaning if your opponent does have a bunch of face-up spell or trap cards, the card is actually good. The problem though is that once again, specifically it's about face-up spell and trap cards, meaning you don't exactly have a lot of targets. However, field spells do fall under the category of face-up spell and trap cards, so there is that. The next one being XZ Tank Cannon requires X-Head Cannon and Z Metal Tank. Once again, you do not use polymerization, but you must banish the above 2 indicated cards that you control. Also, it cannot be special summoned from the graveyard. Its unique effect says that you can discard one card and target one face-down spell or trap card your opponent controls to destroy that target. As you can see, it's a little bit similar to the previous one, the main difference being that it actually focuses on face down spell and trap cards as opposed to just simply face up. They're both fairly specific and situational, although one advantage that this card does have over the previous one is the fact that this one does have 2400 attack as opposed to Dragon Cannon's 2200 attack. And the third one is YZ Tank Dragon. This one requires Y Dragon Head and Z Metal Tank, and once again you must banish these two that you control, cannot use polymerization, and cannot be special summoned from the graveyard. And also, you can discard one card, then target one face down monster your opponent controls to destroy that target. To be completely honest, this one is the worst of the three, simply because it does have the worst attack of the three, in addition to it targeting face down monsters. When it comes to face down spell or traps, face up spell or traps, or face down monsters, it's very obvious that nowadays face down monsters are the least used among these three different ones. If there was a card that said face up monsters, that would actually probably be the best one, but unfortunately there is not. So if you're running this kind of deck and are actually at your peak of 15 extra deck monsters, this is one of the first ones that I recommend to actually get rid of because it's simply not that effective compared to others. Moving on to the boss monster initially at the time, XYZ Dragon Cannon. This one here is a level 8 light machine monster with 2800 attack and 2600 defense, and it requires X Head Cannon, Y Dragon Head, and Z Metal Tank. Must first be special summoned from your extra deck by banishing the above cards you control. You do not use polymerization. Cannot be special summoned from the graveyard. You can discard one card, then target one card your opponent controls to destroy that target. This was actually a pretty amazing card back when it came out, simply because of the fact that it combines all the different elements of the previous 3 fusion monsters, and it's still not a once per turn, meaning as long as you have cards in your hand, you get to essentially wipe out your opponent's field, because you get to pick and choose what you want to destroy in what order. So yeah, it was actually a good card when it came out, but really the most difficult part about this card is the summoning condition, because sometimes it's not exactly easy to bring out all 3 cards onto the field, because you must control them. Regardless though, it's a card that's iconic, and it definitely still has some presence today. As I mentioned previously, several years later, there was the introduction of 2 additional cards, meaning V Tiger Jet and W Wing Catapult. V Tiger Jet is a vanilla monster with 1600 attack and 1800 defense, and it's a level 4, so overall pretty decent stats for level 4 I suppose. Whereas W Wing Catapult is only at 1300 attack but 1500 defense, but it is actually an effect union monster. The effect of this one says once per turn, you can either target one V Tiger Jet you control, equip this card to that target, or unequip this card and special summon it. A monster equipped with this card gains 400 attack and defense. Also, if the equipped monster would be destroyed by battle or card effect, destroy this card instead. Once again, standard protection union monster, but specifically for V Tiger Jet, thus actually making this one a little bit less useful. In addition, the fact that it has the worst stats among the 5 main monsters so far doesn't really do it any favors either. However, when combined, the 2 actually create VW Tiger Catapult. This one is a level 6 fusion monster with 2000 attack and 2100 defense. You need V Tiger Jet and W Wing Catapult to make this one, and the effect says that it must first be special summoned from your extra deck by banishing the above cards you control, and once again, you do not use polymerization. Its unique effect says you can discard one card, then target one monster your opponent controls. Change that target's battle position. Flip effects are not activated. This one does have a little bit of use because sometimes it is actually effective to change an opponent's boss monster that's in defense mode into attack mode, or vice versa if you need to beat over that. But one thing that stands out above this card above the others is the fact that this card can be special summoned from the graveyard. Basically, it's a clause that they chose to remove, and back in the day of Magician's Force days, it was pretty obvious that they implemented that clause and that limitation because they thought the cards would actually be too broken and too easy to get back on the field, which understandably so, I kind of see where they're coming from, but a few years later, when this card came out, they decided, you know what, this series of monsters are not even overpowered or broken by any means, so you know what, let's do it. Let's go ahead and remove that clause, and I would have to agree with that decision because that was actually a very good choice. Now, if we take the previously mentioned XYZ Dragon Cannon alongside VW Tiger Catapult and combine them together, you can create the amazing VW XYZ Dragon Catapult Cannon. This one is a level 8 light machine monster with 3000 attack and 2800 defense. The effect says that it must first be special summoned from your extra deck by banishing the above cards you control. You do not use polymerization. And once per turn, you can target one card your opponent controls, banish that target. And when this card declares an attack on an opponent's monster, you can target the attack target and change that attack target's battle position. Flip effects are not activated. While this one does have the highest attack of all the fusion monsters so far, and rightfully so, it's actually pretty lackluster. Simply because its special summoning condition is ridiculously difficult to get off. It's already pretty hard sometimes to get an XYZ Dragon Cannon onto the field or a VW Tiger Catapult, but the fact that you have to have both on the field at the same time to be able to special summon this thing It makes it almost impossible. In addition, if you do get to actually special summon this card hypothetically, you get a 3000 attack monster that can target one card on the field per turn and banish it, which is, hey, not half bad, right? But here's the thing, in some ways, this effect can actually be a little less useful, because it is actually a once per turn, despite it actually not requiring a discarding cost and it banishing the card instead of destroying it. The once per turn can actually limit it a fair amount, even more so than XYZ Dragon Cannon. The attacking effect is also useful, but more often than not it's not going to be game changing in any way. So overall, while it's appreciated to have these effects, it's actually a little bit underpowered in terms of how difficult it actually is to bring out this card, and that's why this card is really not played. XYZ Dragon Cannon sometimes is, but this one, obviously, it's really not. And here's what's funny, if you actually thought that this card was actually the final boss monster when it comes to fusion monsters, you're actually incorrect, because there is in fact one more card, and this one is a material. So Armed Dragon Catapult Cannon is actually the final monster among these fusion monsters. This one actually has 3500 attack and 3000 defense, and it requires VWXYZ Dragon Catapult Cannon and Armed Dragon level 7 as its materials. The effect basically reads that it must first be special summoned from your extra deck. During a duel, you special summon both the above cards by banishing the above cards from your field and or graveyard. You do not use polymerization. Also, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects with the same name as any banished card. Once per turn, during your opponent's turn quick effect, you can banish one card from your deck or extra deck face up to banish all cards your opponent controls and in their graveyard. So the effect is absolutely amazing, right? It actually is. However, this goes back to kind of the other card, how it's already really difficult to even bring out a VWXYZ Dragon Catapult Cannon, but in addition, this card will actually also force you to play Armed Dragons, which, let's be honest, those are not some of the best cards nowadays. The fact that its materials are actually two monsters that are really never going to be played and incredibly difficult to bring out, that's already a problem, because here's the thing about the first effect. It says that you have to have special summon both of the above cards. Now, they can both be in the graveyard, at least that's a little bit of a saving grace. Luckily, you don't have to have them both on the field, or this card would be literally impossible to summon. The fact that they can be in the graveyard makes it a tiny bit easier, but still really difficult because they have to both be summoned and then somehow sent to the graveyard or stay on the field, which is really difficult. If you do get this card hypothetically onto the field, it's almost going to guarantee you the win. Essentially locking out your opponent from activating any cards that have the same name as banished cards, and the fact that this card basically can banish every single card in your opponent's graveyard and on the field at the same time, yeah, that just won you the duel right there. It's pretty easy. So if you can get this on the field, yeah, game's over, but the problem is getting it onto the field, which is why this card is pretty much never played. Fast forward several years later into 2016 with the introduction of the Kaiba Structure deck, we got introduced to the A, B, and C monsters, meaning A Assault Core, B Buster Drake, and C Crush Wyvern. All three are light level 4 Machine Union monsters once again, which is definitely a good thing. No vanillas this time. And if we start with A Assault Core, the effect says once per turn you can either target one light machine monster you control, equip this card to that target, or unequip this card and special summon it. A monster equipped with this card is unaffected by your opponent's monster effects except its own. Also, if the equipped monster would be destroyed by battle or card effect, destroy this card instead. If this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can add one other Union monster from your graveyard to your hand. Essentially, as you can clearly see, these effects are upgrades. The very first thing that you'll notice is the fact that this monster's stats are actually a little bit better. It's 1900 beat stick with no downside to its effects, which is definitely a plus. In addition, its targeting for it being a union is actually more universal, because it says you can target one light machine monster you control, meaning you don't specifically have to force yourself to target a specific monster. That already makes it better because it's more flexible. The next part of its effect is not a straight upgrade from the XYZ monsters, because essentially it gives the targeted monster that's equipped to more protection, but it doesn't actually provide an attack or defense bonus, kind of like what the XYZ and VW monsters did. But in most cases, the additional protection is actually better than the slight upgrade with attack. And lastly, it has a floating effect that if it's sent from the field to the graveyard, you can add one other Union monster from your graveyard to your hand, essentially making you not go minus, which is another good effect. Overall, you can clearly see that there's power creep in Yu-Gi-Oh, and this is a very good example. A 2016 card compared to a 2003 card, and you can easily see the difference 13 years later. If we look at B Buster Drake, however, the effects are actually very similar. Basically, the first part of the effect is the same, but the main difference is that the target that it's equipped to is actually protected from spell effects as opposed to monster effects. In addition, the floating effect is also a little bit different. This one actually lets you add one unit monster from your deck to your hand, which technically is better than Assault Core, because in most cases you do want to add from your deck into the hand to thin out the deck. Other than that, everything else is actually identical compared to a Assault Core. And lastly, we have Sea Crush Wyvern. So for this one specifically, it protects the targeted monster from trap effects, and if this one is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can special summon one unit monster from your hand, but everything else is actually the same. As you can see, there's a lot of similarities from the three cards, with the biggest difference being the stats, of course, as well as the protection and the floating effect. But everything else of it being unions and equipping to light machine monsters, and essentially being able to offer protection by battle or card effect, is actually the exact same thing. But overall, the three of them are actually better than the first 5 of this series. Moving on to the boss monster of these three, we have ABC Dragon Buster. This one here is a light machine monster with 3000 attack and 2800 defense, and you need a Assault Core, B Buster Drake, and Sea Crush Wyvern to make this card. Its effect says it must first be special summoned from your extra deck by banishing the above cards you control and or from your graveyard. You do not use polymerization. Once per turn quick effect, you can discard one card, then target one card on the field, banish it. During your opponent's turn quick effect, you can tribute this card, then target 3 of your banished light machine unit monsters with different names to special summon them. Out of every card in this entire series of cards, this one is by far the best for several different reasons. For one, the special summoning condition is significantly easier to achieve compared to the previous ones, because this one actually does not require your cards to be on the field specifically. Instead, they can be in the graveyard or a combination of both. That by default will make ABC Dragon Buster appear a lot more often than XYZ Dragon Cannon. The second thing that's fantastic about this card is the fact that it has 2 quick effects. As a quick effect, you can discard one card and target one card on the field to banish it. That right there is fantastic despite it being a once per turn, because you can essentially use it once on your turn, once on your opponent's turn, and it actually banishes the card as opposed to destroying it, unlike XYZ Dragon Cannon. Really, the only slight advantage by this point that XYZ Dragon Cannon has is that once again, it's not a once per turn, so you can destroy potentially up to like 5 or 6 cards on your turn, but that's actually a very small limitation that ABC Dragon Buster doesn't have, so it's actually fine. And then lastly, its quick effect protection effect is actually also incredibly useful. Basically, if the card is about to get destroyed, you can just activate its quick effect instead to tribute it to then special summon 3 of your monsters onto the field, which means that on your next turn, you can then go into another ABC Dragon Buster. And ultimately, this is actually the reason why ABC Dragon Buster was actually limited and now just got hit on the limited list again now that we're going into Master Rule revisions. Simply because people think that it's going to be a little too overpowered on the fact that you can just essentially protect it and then bring out the monster on your next turn as well. So it's very interesting that they ended up doing that, but some people actually do disagree with that move. And the last monster is A to Z Dragon Buster Cannon. This one is a light level 10 machine fusion monster with 4000 attack and 4000 defense. Its materials include ABC Dragon Buster and XYZ Dragon Cannon. The effect reads, must be special summoned from your extra deck by banishing cards you control with the above original names and cannot be special summoned by other ways. You do not use polymerization. During either player's turn, when your opponent activates a spell, trap, or monster effect, you can discard one card, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. During either player's turn, you can banish this card, then target one each of your banished ABC Dragon Buster and XYZ Dragon Cannon, special summon them. So the last effect is incredibly similar to ABC Dragon Buster's effect, essentially offering protection if it does get targeted by something, because it is in fact a quick effect that you can just use to then special summon your 2 cards back. Its negation effect is not once per turn, and all you have to do is discard one card to negate any effect, meaning a spell, a trap, or a monster effect. That right there is actually one of the best negates ever in the entire game. Ever. So you may be thinking, well, why doesn't anybody play this as opposed to ABC Dragon Buster? Well, if you take a look at its special summoning condition, it's actually horrendous. It says must be special summon, not must first be special summon. Must be special summon from your extra deck by banishing cards you control with the above original names. In other words, it's actually an Omni monster, not a semi-Omni monster. And then secondly, the cards have to actually be on your field. You must control them, both ABC Dragon Buster and XYZ Dragon Cannon. It's really bad. If the summoning condition was slightly easier, well, here's the thing, I don't think that the effects that it has would actually be as powerful. They would balance it out. It's balanced out by the fact that the card is horrendously difficult to bring out, which is why I kind of see what they were going with this, but overall nobody plays it, simply because it's just way too difficult to bring out. Lastly, there are two additional cards that I want to quickly talk about, meaning Union Hanger and Union Scramble. Union Hanger is a field spell that says when this card is activated, you can add one Light Machine Union monster from your deck to your hand once per turn. If a Light Machine Union monster is normal or special summoned to your field except during the damage step, you can target one of those monsters. Equip one appropriate Light Machine Union monster with a different name from your deck to that monster, but the Union monster you equipped cannot be special summoned this turn. You can only activate one Union Hanger per turn. This is actually a fantastic piece in addition to this series of cards. And like I was saying before, it's actually not an archetype. As you can see, the support that this series of monsters has is just really specified by attributes and types and even unions. In other words, you can clearly tell that this card is specifically designed for A to Z series of monsters. On activation, it has a search effect, which is fantastic, and a once per turn summon effect. Honestly, it's a really good card, and yeah, this is definitely what you need, as well as terraforming to just search it out easier. And the last one is Union Scramble. This one says target up to 3 of your banished Light Machine type normal monsters and or Light Machine type Union monsters. Special summon them. During either player's turn, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target one of your banished Light Machine type normal monsters or Light Machine type Union monsters, return it to the hand. You can only activate one Union Scramble per turn. Another really good card, and not as useful as Union Hanger, specifically because it's a trap card and you actually only use it once you already have some of these cards banished, which means it's a little more difficult to actually just universally activate it and use its effects really good, which makes it more difficult. So that right there is actually it for the entire A to Z series of cards. In terms of other cards you can use to benefit even more, you can use cards like Rollout or Frontline Base because those are definitely very useful cards for Union decks in general. In addition, one of the newer cards released, meaning Union Carrier, is actually pretty good. It's actually a Link monster that gives even more specific support for these series of cards, and it's actually technically a related card to the series as well. Obviously, if you can find other cards that support specifically machine or light monsters, then they're also pretty beneficial. There's actually a card known as Heavy Mech Support Armor, which is also pretty good in terms of helping your monsters out. An older card and slightly weaker variation would be Heavy Mech Support Platform, which also can be used, but it's a little bit slower. So that's about it for this series of cards. As always, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you have not done so already, and if you want to see more future videos. And as always, I will see you all in the next one. Bye bye everyone, have a great and of course a fantastic day.